let's just say Donovan, Ezeiruaku, and James Pearce are available. Who do you think is a better fit for the Eagles?
Well, because they're totally different. One guy's long and
Exactly.
lean, the other guy's kind of short. I mean, they both play the same position. So now that's a hard question for me to answer because now it comes down to number one, who they think is a better prospect. I
Mhm.
think Pierce has more potentially to him. In other words, if you could coach the kid up at 6'5", with his athleticism, he's a twitchier player than Ezeiruaku. Um, so I would say Pierce would be the player that I think you would likely want to take. He has a ways to go, but I think there's more to him that there'd be ideally a better payoff.
Outside of Gentry and Hampton, who do you see as having those true foundational traits?
It depends on team and scheme. Caleb Johnson in the right system, he's very much a paint by numbers runner. He's a zone runner because that's what Iowa did, and he was very, very good at it. But if you put him with the San Francisco 49ers, for instance, there's no question Caleb Johnson could be a feature back. Who's to say Cam Scatterbo couldn't be a feature back? He weighs 220 pounds. He's a physical, intense runner. He's a sustainer more than a big playback. A back that I really like, who is very much reminds me of Josh Jacobs, is Damian Martinez. To my way of thinking, I absolutely think Damian Martinez could be a guy that could carry the ball 17 to 22 times a week.
Oh, real quick before we move on, Greg. So over the years, obviously the decades you would watch a tape where a guy turns out to be way better than you thought. Do you go back and say, "What did I miss?" Do you go back and
Yeah,
look? Yeah.
sometimes, yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I try. Well, let's put it this way: I try to figure out why.
Right.
You know,
Right. Or
I mean,
or maybe most of the league saw it like you did, and you just went to a situation like Kyron Williams, by the way, where no one saw that.
I'll
You
give
know?
you an example in this year's draft, and we won't know
Okay.
for a couple of years, but I see this guy as a top 7, 8 linebacker prospect. I watched his tape last summer from 2023, and I watched
Yeah.
him this year, and I don't get it. And that's Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. I really don't understand it. I don't think this guy is an NFL player at a meaningful level. When I say not an NFL player, I'm not saying that, he may never be in the league. But, I see him as a sixth or seventh rated linebacker on some lists. And, I've studied him in detail and I don't see it at all.
Adam said exactly what answered the other part, that it could be the coaching. He didn't put him in the right position. Maybe
There's another example this year of a guy, and I'm truly fascinated to see who drafts him and how he's deployed, and that's Jahdae Barron from Texas. In 2023, he predominantly played in the slot. 2024, he predominantly played outside. He still played meaningful snaps in the slot, but he was predominantly an outside corner for Texas. Now, he's mocked and talked about as a top 10 player, even though the slot position has really gained in importance. We just saw Kyler Gordon from the Bears get paid a lot of money. We saw Jalen Petrie get paid a lot of money. So the slot corner position, people are recognizing that it's definitely important. But I personally believe that Barron is a slot corner in the NFL. So that to me, he's a slot. So again, Al, this is a perfect example of who drafts him and how they deploy him. A team could draft him and put him outside. I don't think he'd be now. I think he's a really good football player, by the way. Just to make a cliched statement, I think he's a really good football player, but I just don't think he's an outside corner.
What would be your draft strategy if that was the case?
I don't know what it means, and I'm being totally honest. I think that's another one of those cliches that's thrown out there. Not that teams don't have 32 first round picks. That's true. They don't. I understand that as an absolute fact that teams don't. But I don't know exactly what that means because you have to draft guys. So you still have to, in your mind, put together some kind of board and you've got to draft players. Okay. So if you have pick 25, what does it mean that you only have 16 players with first down grades? It ultimately doesn't mean anything because you're picking 25. You're not going to say, well, I'm not picking. I only had 16 guys. It's an irrelevant thing to say. You have to evaluate the players and then pick players. The way the draft works now is unless somebody falls that you truly have rated super high, you're drafting the best player at a position of need. It's funny. Here's what I do. I watch guys on film and then I write up my report. And when I'm done doing all that, then I look at some of the websites to see what other, quote unquote draft guys do.
Yeah.
And sometimes after I'm done with a guy, I read what, guys I respect, guys I know. Adam knows the same guys. We've known these guys for years.
Yeah.
And I read it and go, is he watching the same guy that I
Yeah,
just watched
yeah.
7 games of? I mean, and again, I'm not saying that makes me right. It's just so. And sometimes I feel like guys evaluate guys based on what their status is in the minds of the masses. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in other words, if a guy is viewed as a 5th round pick, sometimes I feel like some of these other draft guys grade him or write him up as if he's a 5th round pick, as opposed to just watching his tape and seeing, okay, I really like this guy. And the other factor too is, particularly on defense, you have to think about how a guy fits in the league. Defenses nowadays can play 18,
Projection.
19 players in any given game. Just because a guy may not be a starter doesn't mean he can't be a good pro. Believe me, you talk to defensive coaches, a guy they may play 20 snaps of dime and they have a dime safety. Well, you know what? Those 20 snaps, they freaking matter. So when you evaluate a player, you might come away and go, you know what? I think this guy could be a really good dime player.
Greg, can you
Yes.
speak on Cooper DeJean's physicality, playing the nickel position, and what makes him so fit for that role?
Well, first, let's do a very quick tutorial on the nickel position. Contrary to what many believe, not necessarily you, but a lot of people for years have thought, oh, it's just covering slot receivers. It's so much more than that. And first of all, just in terms of covering, don't forget that slot receivers have a two-way go. They can work inside and outside. The sideline is not your friend when you're playing in the slot. So you have to be proficient in zone, which means you're usually there's 2 parts of zone that you have to be proficient in. You have to be proficient in being a hook to curl defender, which is inside, and a flat defender, which is outside. So you have to be proficient in that. You obviously have to be proficient in playing man coverage against whatever kind of receiver plays in the slot, sometimes tight ends. You also have to be able to be a good blitzer at times. And you have to be a really good run defender, because there are defensive fronts in which the slot defender is a B gap player in run defense. So you have to be able to do that. So DeJean is actually proficient in all those things. He's big, he's physical, he's incredibly intelligent. He has a great feel for zone coverage. There were so many times. See, when you watch guys play zone, Hassan, the one thing that they have to be really aware of is route concepts and combinations. So they can't just drop the days of the cover 2 and the Tony Dungy cover 2 where guys just drop to landmarks. Those days are over. You have to be able to read routes and route concepts and have a feel for that. So DeJean is really, really good at that. You have to understand how your role changes when there's motion. Even if it's zone, your role can change when it's motion. If a 2x2 set becomes a 3x1 set, that changes your zone responsibilities in how the routes may then develop and play out. So there's so many factors that go into playing slot corner, and DeJean is really good at all of them.
My question is about weight. When they go to the combine and when they do their the weight they play at, how does that affect your grades on, because they play faster if they're lighter, but how does that affect your overall grade and how you project them?
Well, I mean, obviously, I don't know what they play at during the season because I'm not privy to that. The only weights you get is if they go to a bowl game like the East West or the Senior Bowl, and then at the combine. So those are the only weights that you get, and at a pro day, if you want to look at that as well. But what they play at during the season, we have no idea. Like, for instance, Travis Hunter, a lot of people believe that he played during the season at 175, and now he was 188 at the combine. So, I don't, who knows? Travis Hunter knows, but who knows, so, weight for me is, unless like, for instance, I thought Mason Graham was heavy watching his Michigan tape, and he was listed at 318, and he came to the combine at 296. Now, maybe he got with a nutritionist, a trainer who said, hey, you're heavy. I don't know the answer to that, but he definitely weighed more than 296 when, playing in Michigan this year.
I think the kind of wild card in this year's draft is Shedeur Sanders. And I was wondering if you give me your opinion on him in a normal draft where we have, 5 first-round draft picks, or maybe 3 first-round grades, where would he fit in a normal draft?
I'll read to you what I typed. And by the way, just so you guys know, I actually watched in the summer of 20. What are we? We're in 25 now. God, I lose track of the years. I've been
Yes.
doing it so
Yeah.
long. Well, the point is, after his last year at Jackson State, I watched him. After his first year at Colorado, I watched him, and of course, this summer I watched him. So I've seen him for 3 years in a row. So I've seen a lot of games of Shedeur Sanders. So here's what I typed when I was done. I said Sanders is an easy, natural thrower, despite not having higher level arm strength. And there is no question he can make all the necessary throws at the next level with the needed precise ball placement, which was clearly a strength of his game. Sanders' strengths as you project and transition him to the next level are as a pocket quarterback with his pure throwing ability and his vision and feel for the game, working behind a strong pass protecting O-line with quality receivers and a well-schemed passing game that presents defined reads and throws within the structure and timing of the route concepts. Think Kirk Cousins with the Vikings in his prime. I said, overall, there is much to work with, given that Sanders is an excellent natural thrower, but he must be coached hard in the fundamentals and details and nuances of the quarterback position, and it may take some time for him to work through that process.
Greg, so Daniel Jeremiah was talking today, and he was raving about the 3 guys in the secondary for Cal. So I wanted to hear what do you think about them?
I love Noah Williams. Love him. He had a great matchup, by the way, against the Stanford wide receiver, who most people think will be a day 2 pick, Ayo Minor. But I really love Noah Williams. He's long, he's athletic. The big thing with him was his 40 time. It was good enough where it's not a problem. He's certainly not a sudden twitchy athlete. And some people will be concerned about his vertical speed from press, and that's probably why he wouldn't be, a top 40 pick. But this kid is he's aggressive. He's competitive. He can play multiple press concepts. And when I say multiple press, there's normally 2 kinds of press. There's mirror match press, in which you let the receiver declare his release and then you just match it. You don't put your hands on him. You match it. You get in his hip pocket. Okay. And then there's physical press, where you jam him. He can do both of that really well. I thought that he actually was another guy that was very good with playing zone. Someone asked me about that earlier. I thought he was really good at playing zone. So I really like Noah Williams. I think that I assuming we're talking about the other corner, who's Harris is his name. I can't remember his first name. Do you guys remember his
Harris.
first name?
I know his last name too, Harris. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember his first name because I have my list by first names, and now I can't. So I can't. But I think he's going to be a slot corner in the league because he's smaller. So to me, he's going to end up being in the slot. I guess then the safety would be the other guy, right?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. Is it Woodson? Is that his name? Woodson?
It's Woodson.
Yep.
And I'm trying to remember his first name too.
Craig Woodson.
Craig Woodson.
Craig.
He's an interesting guy too. He's over 6 feet. He's 200 pounds. He's pretty smooth. He's competitively tough. There's a physical component to his game. I thought he played the run really, really well. He predominantly aligned to the boundary in their 2 high safety structures in college. I thought he was best with his eyes forward, reacting to what was in front of him rather than playing on the back end. He's not a post safety, but with teams playing so much more quarters where you're not just a single post safety. I thought he was a really interesting player. So yeah, Williams I really liked. Woodson I liked a good amount, and the other corner Harris I think is going to move inside to the slot.
Question for both of you guys really is, from people that you talk to or just things that you know in your tape study, what is the balance between how you're going to deploy one guy versus the other guy just being the better player?
Well, I think also, Eric, there's a little hindsight now, because don't forget, Jefferson was the 22nd or 23rd player chosen. And if people knew what he was going to be, he would have been a top 5 or 6 player chosen. So, and I'm not defending Howie Roseman. I mean, we know how it all turned out. I will say this: Jefferson predominantly his last year at LSU played in the slot. I remember that something like 104 out of his 111 catches came out of the slot. The year before he did play outside, but the sample size wasn't large. So there were a lot of people that thought that this guy's a slot only receiver. And obviously maybe the Eagles thought that too. We don't know the answer to that. Rager was viewed as more just explosive, just a more explosive athlete. I think everybody knew that he needed some work as a wide receiver in terms of the nuances of the position, but coaches always think you can coach that. That's why they're coaches. And you're 100% right. I think there was a sense that Rager could do more things in the context of an offense than Jefferson could. Now, we can sit here today, in 2025 and laugh about it like, oh God, these people are idiots. You can do that with a lot of picks over the years. That's always easy to do. But there was a reason they made the pick. They turned out to be incorrect. You're doing really well with the draft if you're 50% or 55% right over a long period of time. But look, the bottom line is the Eagles did not draft Jalen Hurts to be a starting quarterback. That's the bottom line. So that's kind of worked out for them. So I think that
you never know.
Yeah, you never know. And, sometimes you do draft players, Eric, because you see them within your scheme. In your mind, you see a place for them because coaches think about scheme adaptability. They think, okay, here's my scheme. I can deploy this guy this way, and he's going to be really effective in my scheme.